Hello, my name's Willow from the Really Big Pants Theatre Company, and today I'm going to read you a story from our book, Suddenly and Other Sandwiches. Stories. Written by Joe Bromley, the other half of Really Big Pants Theatre Company, who sadly can't be with us today because of lockdown. I'm going to read you the story Shelved, which is the third story in the book. And it stars Grandma and Red, who are in our show Suddenly, which some of you may have seen, either at your school or in a venue. So, Shelved, Chapter 1. Norma Dimble had worked in Flappington Library for 47 years. She had started as a junior assistant to old Mr. Tibbs, back in the day when library books had little tickets inside and had to be date-stamped to be borrowed. Other colleagues had come and gone, but Norma loved nothing more than books, and when Mr. Tibbs retired at the age of 104, she finally became the head librarian. Now, 2 minutes before opening time, she stood by her desk with the key to the door in her hand and surveyed the space around her. There were books, of course, but also a row of computers, a photocopier, a rack of DVDs, giant colourful cushions on the floor of the children's room. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Even the clock ticked in silence. As Norma's eyes travelled over the books, neatly arranged in alphabetical order on the shelves, she felt a sense of pride. Amongst the various activities that would be taking place that day were Book Flaps, the Children's Reading Club, the OAP Rap Writing Performance Poetry Club, and the support group for collectors of rubber chickens. Flappington Library would be filled with people of all ages, colours, shapes and sizes, bringing noise and life to the building. Norma watched the clock reach the hour and nodded to herself. She headed to the door and unlocked it. It was going to be a very important day. Chapter 2. It was just after 11 o'clock when Grandma and Red zoomed into the library. Rusty Build-Up, the caretaker, was up a wobbly ladder outside the front door with an assortment of paint pots and a large paintbrush. "Morning, Rusty," called Grandma. "How's your back today?"
"Oh, not so bad, thank you, Grandma," he replied. "Lots of odd jobs to get done around the place, though. I'm just giving the door a nice fresh coat of paint."
Red could see her friends in the children's room already gathered for their weekly Book Flaps reading club. 2 of her best friends waved at her through the large glass doors separating the area. These 2 friends were Benoit, a very excitable French boy with big brown eyes, and Gig, a clever girl with lots of curly hair and really cool glasses. Gig was deaf and wore hearing aids, but was also a skilled lip reader and had been using sign language from a very young age. Red loved discussing books with them and had been having fun learning French with Benoit and to sign with Gig. She gave Grandma a kiss on the cheek and skipped off to join the club. "Laters, Grandma." "Indeed, laters, Red," replied Grandma. "I'll be waiting for you in an hour. And you be careful up that ladder, Rusty. I'll bring you out a cup of tea. You look like you've earned one." The children's room was packed, with everybody all talking about the book they had been reading that week. Nadia, who ran the club and was also the mum of Zainab, Fatima and Myrna, 3 of Red's school friends, was handing out sheets of paper. As well as discussing the books they read, Nadia encouraged them to write their own stories and to design artwork which they displayed on the walls. "Before we begin, I'd like to introduce a new member of our group, Beatrix Bloom. I know you'll all be very welcoming and that she's going to have a great time with us," she said. Beatrix waved at everyone and beamed a big smile, and they all chorused hello to her. "Now,
continued Nadia. As well as our thoughts on this week's book, there's a special project I want us to work on. I'm going to divide you into teams and you're going to design a poster for the upcoming short story competition. We'll put all the posters up, but there's only room for one on the main notice board, so make it enticing. Remember, there are 2 separate categories, one for children and one for grown-ups, and the winning stories will be published in the local newspaper. Red, do you think Grandma will be entering this year? We all know how much she loves stories.
Oh, I'm sure she will, said Red. We know a witch on roller skates who wants to enter too. And I'll tell my neighbour, Edwin. He's really into stories now.
Excellent. OK, the teams are Alex with Tess, Mabel, Liv, Zainab and Beatrix. You're all going to be on the table in the corner. Those children all ran to sit down. Nadia then pointed to another table. Naomi's team will have Jack, Ferdors, Harry, Oliver and Betty. This is your space here. Standing by the third table, Nadia called out, Hebe, your team will be on this table. You'll have Jacob, Isabella, Stan, Myrna and Mason. Hebe and her team all rushed to take their places. Finally, Nadia turned to the remaining children. So that leaves Red, Benoit, Gig, Cosmo, Maeve and Fatima. You're going to be on the cushions down here. Team captains, come and get your pens to share. Let's get crafty.
Chapter 3. Grandma was sitting beside Norma's desk. They were both having a cup of tea and sorting through donated food bank items and dividing them into categories. Slurped Grandma. Nothing like a good cup of tea, dear. Yes, Grandma, replied Norma, watching the clock. Lovely. I've so enjoyed reading the book choice this week. I'm looking forward to discussing it. I particularly relish the grisly crime in Chapter 3, said Grandma. She was part of the adults' reading club, the Dusty Jackets, who met on Tuesdays. Yes, Grandma, replied Norma, checking her watch. Lovely. Grandma observed the preoccupied librarian for a moment. I'm flying to the moon this afternoon, she said. Yes, Grandma, replied Norma, looking back at the clock. Lovely. Norma, said Grandma, you're ever so distracted today. Shall I leave you in peace, dear? I can go and check my emails on the computers or something. Oh, I'm sorry, Grandma. You're right. I am distracted today. I've got a lot on my mind. Is there anything I can help with? Asked Grandma. We've known each other for a long time. I'm always happy to listen. Thank you, Grandma, but I think this is something that... They were interrupted by a clatter outside and a shout from Rusty.
Oi! Watch where you're going! I nearly fell off me ladder!
In the doorway stood 3 people in suits, casting an ominous shadow. Hookham, Bodge and Curdle. Chapter 4. A friendly rivalry had broken out in the children's room as the teams started on their posters. Alex was urging his team to consider dinosaurs after a recent visit to the Natural History Museum. Everyone loves dinosaurs, he said, wielding a felt tip. If we draw a really big one, people will be inspired to write stories. Our poster will definitely be the best. Meanwhile, Naomi, artistic as ever, had gone for a cutout design, and everyone at her table was busy snipping. Hebe's team was squabbling over the glue, and several of them already had their fingers stuck together. Red, Benoit, Gig, Maeve, Cosmo and Fatima were discussing their options. I think we should do it like this, said Benoit, sketching out a possibility. How does it look like? Red considered his sketch and tapped Gig's shoulder. She pointed to the picture and held her thumb up, questioningly. Gig shook her head and picked up a pencil, quickly outlining her idea. It was going to take a lot of diplomacy for them all to decide on how best to design their poster. Back at Alex's table, roaring and laughter erupted. Their dinosaur was now on a surfboard and eating fudge. But, as Red knew, anything could happen in a story. Chapter 5. As Hookham, Bodge and Curdle approached the desk, Grandma's hair let out a tiny shower of warning sparks.
"Good morning, ladies," said Hookham,
consulting a folder he was carrying.
"We've come to measure up."
Norma hastily got to her feet. "Oh, yes, Mr. Hookham," she said, rushing round the desk. "Let me show you the area."
"There's no need for that, Miss Dimble," piped up Bodge. "We can see it all clearly from here."
He turned and gazed round the room.
"Nice high ceilings."
"Yes," added Curdle coldly, revealing an assortment of measuring tapes about his person and selecting an industrial-looking one. He pulled the strip of tape measure from its case and let it snap back with a threatening thwack. "Don't let us disturb you. We'll just start with this shelf, this bookshelf right here," he said, turning to the nearest one. "OK, yes. Wait, what?" said Norma. "Why would you measure the shelves?" "Yes, gentlemen, why would you measure the shelves?" asked Grandma, looking at Bodge and Curdle, who had already set to work.
"Didn't you know, madam," said Hookham, "we're clearing all these old books out. This library is the new storage space for our company. Someone," and here he glared at Bodge, "leant on the 0 button on the computer whilst doing the stationery order and bought 80 million rolls of packing tape." "Sorry, boss," mumbled Bodge, swiftly moving on to measure another shelf. "So, as you can imagine, we need a storage facility for the excess packing tape we now have, and these shelves will be perfect once we've got rid of the books. We won't take up any more of your morning. I can see how busy you are."
Hookham finished with a sneering nod at the tins of beans lined up in front of Grandma. "No, but wait," cried Norma, although not very loudly. She never raised her voice in the library. "It's only the social area and the computers and the DVD display section that are going."
"I'm afraid not, Miss Dimble. This whole place is deemed a social area. Everything is going."
He stared through the glass into the children's room and smirked.
"Particularly everything in there."
He sauntered off to join Bodge and Curdle.
"That's right, boys. Keep measuring."
Behind Norma, Grandma stood up. "Oh, Norma, what have you done?" And we will leave it there until tomorrow, where I will continue with the second part of the book. What will happen next? Tune in tomorrow.